Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I was surprised to find out that all we need to do to solve this problem apparently is have more government employees, more government bureaucrats, more government lawyers to sue. Sounds like it's a winning strategy. I don't know why we haven't tried that over the last 40 or 50 years here. But the Breakthrough Institute found that litigation on average results in delays of 4.2 years. With energy infrastructure related litigation delaying project implementation by an average of 3.9 years. Even though agency decisions prevail over 70% of the time, litigation puts a strain on agency resources and injunctions prevent projects from continuing. Plaintiffs and activist judges have taken advantage of NEPA's vague language to delay critical projects and boggle agencies down in additional reviews, often outside of the scope of the proposed action. And in this 7-county infrastructure coalition decision, the Supreme Court reaffirmed that courts must give substantial deference to federal agencies in determining the scope of environmental impact statements. The court criticized lower courts for overstepping by requiring agencies to analyze impacts beyond the scope of the proposed federal action. This ruling marks an important judicial effort to rein in the overreach of environmental reviews under NEPA. However, very few NEPA cases ever reach the Supreme Court. Most are resolved in district and appellate courts, which have become the primary shapers of NEPA jurisprudence. This is especially concerning given that a disproportionate share of federal land use policy is shaped in the Ninth Circuit, where environmental plaintiffs are more likely to succeed. A 2016 study by the National Center for State Courts found that federal district courts within the Ninth Circuit reversed the Forest Service decisions 36.2% of the time, a statistically significant outlier compared to courts in other circuits. Mr. Hergott, given the judicial overreach can undermine congressional intent and circumvent Supreme Court rulings, what tools or legislative reforms can Congress pursue to codify permitting reform and ensure that lower courts adhere to the limits set by the Supreme Court, especially when addressing these activist rulings that expand the scope of NEPA review beyond statutory requirements?
Thank you for the question. I think one thing just to underscore that is it's not just about the court cases and the litigation. In fact, project proponents are winning on a scale of 5 to 1 against the environmental groups. But when you get to a situation like Penn East or Atlantic Coast Pipeline that lost $1.8 billion for Dominion and Duke that was passed on to ratepayers, it's not the fact that you're losing in court. It's the fact that the capital is insanguinated. You no longer have the endurance. Your investors are pulled back. And every piece of capital of a project that is after that is baking in what the decision was and the subjective overreach of what those interpretations are of the overbuild, of doing those studies that are not required, because you don't want to land in court. So it's not just about the actual litigation stats, it's what it's done to the entire process, the gating mechanism before you even start. That's why an application now is 6,000 pages long and costs $50 million, a 300% increase from 4 years ago. So to tell you about agencies staying in their lane, working within their own administrative statutes, and if I may take 20 seconds more, the entire system was built on stopping pipelines, Keystone, XL, Dakota. When the Pipeline Fighters Hub would create this law book, how to stop pipeline projects, much like what's happening in this hearing today, it's a proxy referendum battle on climate change and fossil fuels, not on fixing the process, which is holding back more renewable energy projects than any fossil fuel projects at the moment. And I feel like we can't have a rational debate, and I got to go over and talk to Senator Lee and Senator Heinrich, because the hyperbole and the division here is not allowing us to have a real conversation about what's happening. And what's happening is the American people are suffering. Nothing is building. None of the projects from IRA, none of the fossil fuel projects, and I feel like we're having a Keystone XL battle from 10 years ago with talking points that are not borne out by the facts. And the beauty is, to your point, about the permitting debate is the facts don't lie. And the projects that are not moving are affecting all of us. And they don't belong to any political party in this room. They belong to the people that are putting the capital at risk, because 99% of our infrastructure system is funded by the private sector, and if they go away, they're gone. So if we don't put sideboards on the litigation risk, we're not going to build anything in this country.
Yeah, and to your point, it's easy for a lawyer who bills $750 an hour to afford these changes. But the average American, this cost is being borne by them, and that's who we ought to care about as policymakers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.